Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm Sam Moores, and today I'm with Phil Morrison. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. Can you tell the audience a little bit about sort of who you are, what you do?
I'm Phil Morrison. I'm owner of Driftworks, co-owner of Driftworks. I guess probably most known at the moment for building silly Lamborghini. It's probably the most current thing I'm known for. But yeah, I also own Driftworks Limited with my business partner, James Robinson, which is a mail order aftermarket parts company.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, we've recently got stuck into YouTube a bit as well in the past few years.
Yeah. Let's wind back to the sort of beginning of all this. How did this sort of journey begin? Were you in the car world from early days, or have you sort of moved across?
Sort of from very early days, which is quite a long time ago now. I sort of came from modifying other things, from sort of bikes and all sorts of stuff like that. And then as soon as I was able to get a driver's license, it became cars. And from that point on, from 17 onwards, it's been cars, but messing with them, modifying, tuning, ruining, whatever you want to call it. That's what I've been doing since I was 17, basically.
And then, how did you get into, at what point did it start turning into a business?
It was 2004. We became a proper legitimate company. We've been doing a bit beforehand, sort of working out of the loft at my current house and my business partner's house as well. We'd sort of made space where we could for little bits of stock. But yeah, 2004, it became pretty serious and we started doing it full time.
All right. And then presumably a long time selling bits and pieces, which I imagine has evolved significantly over the period of time.
Yeah.
You started drifting?
Yeah, so it was kind of also, it was born out of doing drifting and not being able to find the parts that we needed to build the cars in the way that we wanted to, which was all inspired by sort of Japanese, sort of semi-professional at that point, what became quite professional D1 GP stuff. We were just trying to imitate it very badly. And yeah, sort of finding it hard to get the bits and pieces that we needed. So decided to start doing it ourselves.
So way back then, how was the scene sort of, I imagine, was there a scene in the UK as such?
It was really small and we were there right at the beginning, sort of, I'd say maybe 10 people who had watched a few option DVDs from Japan. Not dubbed, not in English, just trying to understand the basics. The internet was quite a new thing at that point. This is how long ago we're talking. Sort of 2001 is when we started our little band of people sort of doing it for fun. The car builds became a little bit more serious, but they were still largely just based on a normal road car. Nothing too serious at all at that point.
And were there things like, could you get angle kits and stuff like that back then? Or
no, we didn't even know what they were. It took a few years. I mean, at that point, probably the 2003, 2004, we started to understand a little bit more about it. And you got the very basic bits like steering rack lock spacers, things like that. The big angle kits really didn't exist until much later on, until you got people sort of seriously into the engineering side of it. Which was very interesting.
And then, so you were looking at sort of Japan as your reference point. Were they, I guess they were way further ahead, but did they have that sort of stuff then?
They were, at that point, probably starting to modify standard front knuckles, but cars were, they were a lot more stylish back then. It was still really important to have your car sitting at a certain ride height, and you'd see a lot of sort of competition spec cars would run too much rear camber just so you can have nice looking rear wheels on the back of it. They weren't necessarily as perfected as they are nowadays for grip and traction, like most competition drift cars are.
Yeah, and could you, at what point in time were there start to be competitions in the UK?
So, I mean, they started very low-key stuff. We used to use Western Aerodrome near Silverstone, and back then it was still a used airfield, and they used to wet a tarmacked area for us, and we used to spin out just round cones a bit, and then they started to lay out tracks just with cones, and we'd have to go around them. And then the prizes, there was a guy called Kiki Saknana who ran Option, which was a garage not far away from Silverstone, and he started to do the championship and bring in some sponsors and things like that. And it sort of grew from there into then ending up at Silverstone for 5 rounds of a championship, and then to multiple different tracks, proper tracks, but in various different names, different championship names.
Yeah. Was it? I imagine it was quite a good time being in at the sort of grassroots of a sport that no one really knows about. It's quite cool. It's growing. You're having a lot of fun.
Oh, it was some of the best times of my life. Very, very busy, but yeah, as with most things in my life, the car build was a big part of what interested me in sort of developing the car, because really we just knew nothing about what was required for a drift car, or even, I'll freely admit, even a track car at that point. I'd just come from my previous car before this 200SX that I had at that time was Mark II Golf. Before that, it was a couple of minis, nothing serious at all. So yeah, this whole sort of new world of rear-wheel drive and how you get it to stay in a straight line or not was really new and exciting to me at that point.
Yeah, because I guess that must have evolved massively, because I hear about modern cars, it's all about grip, which sounds slightly counterintuitive, but yeah, I sort of get it. But then back then, were you sort of doing the opposite, as in like overinflating rear tires and stuff like that?
Definitely, yeah. So you were in a 200SX. It was pretty standard to start off with. It was 200 horsepower, and you just dig around the scrap piles at a local tire dealer. You'd get your whatever that had come off the back of a BMW 225 wide somethings, stick them on your spare standard wheels quite often. Do a few laps, burn out the inside edge of them because you didn't have camber correction at the rear.
Right.
You had no alignment arms or anything like that. You'd get down as close as you could to the cords, then you'd take the tyre off and put it on the other way around. So you could then burn the outside of it. It was, a very different world to the world now of sort of massive wide, super grippy tyres with full contact patch that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, and then I guess from a sort of scoring point back then, was it kind of just like a style, whoever's sort of done it the most?
Yeah, often right at the beginning, it was who actually got round and maintained drift the whole time. 'Cause like I say, we didn't have any steering lock modifications initially, so it could be, especially when you've got sort of a wetted surface that would then dry in certain places and whatnot. It was quite difficult to maintain angle and not spin out because you hit the lock stops. The skill back then was lower, a lot lower, but we had nobody here to sort of look up to follow. And I think that's one thing that nowadays it's often forgotten, is that it's kind of really easy to follow what somebody else is doing in front of you at a track, or you follow their line or whatever. We kind of very much learnt the hard way by basically being crap at it.
And then do you think, like, if you're learning now, because I can see, you can go out and you can put a whole bunch of bits on your car and then have tons of lock and whatever. Yeah. Presumably, like you said, running on low grip on variable surfaces with not a lot of lock, you have to be much better initially, like ish, I guess.
It's so much slower. It was so much slower back then. And it's kind of where that, the slightly negative reputation for drifting in, other motorsports is taken from the old days, where you did just used to go half the speed of a normal track car going round that same corner would be doing double the speed of what you're doing sideways. So a lot of it was style and line based, kind of the same sort of thing. But it's like I say, it's an extremely different world now. But back then it was quite easy to spot the difference between the guy who could do it and the guy who wasn't that great at it. And now it's all so close and so tight. I just don't envy judges at all in having to pick a difference between drivers. It's a very difficult job.
Yeah, I guess you've got, a bunch of people drifting, small pool of people. Now it's probably a much larger pool, and then just professional. You've got professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, people back then we're all working normal jobs, and, you know, it was your hobby. It was, you put everything into it. And now, people have got sponsors, and all the normal stuff that comes with motorsport is taken very seriously by a lot of people. And some people absolutely ruin themselves financially trying to get to the top spot of what they're doing. And it is, you know, it's not as costly as some of the motorsports, definitely not, but and it's accessible from sort of amateur levels as well, which is still great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely massively different financially to what it was back then in sort of the early 2000s.
Yeah, and I guess all motorsport is just add a few more noughts or a lot more noughts than you remotely expect. To be involved and doing it. What if someone wants to sort of get involved now? What are the sort of base, you know, things that you can go to? Can you just go somewhere and do some drifting? Because I know on track days it gets heavily frowned upon. The street, obviously, not recommended.
So unfortunately, a lot of the smaller venues that were fantastic for learning how to drift at sort of low to medium speeds, they're being shut down by noise and all the normal stuff that we get to hear about in all other forms of motorsport. Anything to do with cars is becoming more and more difficult to do. So nowadays, I don't think there's very much. We lost Rockingham, which was a fantastic venue for us to do sort of decent courses, decent tracks and practice days. We also used to use quite a lot of the serious big tracks, but certain areas of them, or like the Donington Old Melbourne hairpin, that used to be a good area to use. It's just very difficult and very costly nowadays, so there's not that many of them, but there's a few. So I think there's Three Sisters, which is Wigan ways. They do a few drift days. There's Driftland up in Scotland, which is a dedicated drift track, which is extremely cool, but absolutely miles for most people.
Far,
so you can still do it if you're keen. It's just, you know, more difficult than it once was.
Yeah, I did I think it was called Learn to Drift.
Oh yeah,
Rockingham. Which was that was an eye opener into how much I don't know. Some of the experience days and stuff like that. They're it's not quite a 100% accurate representation of the actual world of drifting. So it's you take it with a pinch of salt. I had so much fun though, and we were in I think it was some 200 SXs and a mix of sort of other things, just with like welded diffs, and they were just like, you know, go for it, whatever, like, which was so much fun. But we didn't have very much lock, and that was and talent. I didn't have much talent. But no, it was a lot of fun. So you've done a bunch of competing over your time.
Yeah.
And is that sort of been tied along with the business, or just sort of outside?
It has. Well, kind of the reason the business exists is because things were getting a little bit more serious. We wanted these parts, we couldn't really get them. I was still working a normal job, and so was my business partner at the time. And we'd do what we could in our spare time. We decided to then start up the business, and it just snowballed from there. The championships became more and more serious, and there was actual, you know, decent-ish prize money and prizes to win. They had good support from sponsors and all sorts. So you could kind of, if you were reasonable at it, make it work financially for a year while still having a normal job. But I won the earliest one that I won. I'd always done all right ever since I'd started doing it, sort of podium-ish level. But then sort of some of the bigger ones were the 2006. It's called the D1 GB Championship, which was a spin-off of the D1 GP Japanese Championship that was running the UK. It was judged by proper Japanese drifters. They'd come over for every round. It was really cool. That was probably one of my biggest claims to fame, is winning that championship in 2006. And then kind of steadily competed most years, and I'd do sort of second or thirds in the championship. I think I won the championship again in 2009, but it was a different championship then. It become what was it called then? There's been so many revisions of the high-end drift championship. I can't even remember what that one was. It was the British Drift Championship at that point. Yeah. So I won that in 2009.
Cool.
And I've had little breaks from time to time as well, because I've been doing it for quite a long time. I'm sort of keen to not lose the love for it. And I think it's important to sort of step away from stuff sometimes, just to sort of reset yourself. And come back in a bit keener later on. Does
that mean something you've sort of, had to sort of struggle with? I find it like I'm talking to people about cars all the time. I'm driving cars all the time. Sometimes I just literally just go, I can care less anymore. I'm done.
Absolutely.
Like I need to do something else for as long as possible, and then come back and I'm a bit invigorated again. Yeah,
I mean, mine is it's probably less about moving away from cars. It's more about moving into a different area of messing about with cars. So I'm rather over the top with everything to do with cars, but so I would move away slightly for a year from doing competitive drifting, but I'd then focus my efforts into building something silly as a track car, or I don't know what type of car half my stuff is nowadays, but yeah, sort of building something. And that, as I said before, that's kind of where I get a massive amount of enjoyment out of what we do is the actual build part of the cars as much as the driving them. Yeah, and then presumably at some point they invariably end up, hopefully not, but contacting something solid, and then you've got to rebuild them again. Yeah, I guess that's a sort of necessary evil. Is that quite a stressful part of it, or you just sort of accept with the drift cars anyway? It sort of is what it is. Yeah, with the competition cars, you kind of, especially nowadays, you design them around small impacts or even slightly bigger impacts. You sort of you have crush zones, you have flexible panels, you have in some cases damped bars on the back section of the car that would allow you to sort of slowly crash into a wall and run the wall rather than digging into the wall, things like that. So you definitely don't have quite the same consequence as we did back then when we were doing sort of a road car type of thing. It'd be a massive expense to repair the rear quarter of a car back then, but now it's relatively simple. And I guess, because I remember I've seen bumpers whenever someone, I don't know whether this is like this at the sort of top end now, but you see someone do some drifting and they tag the bumper and it just like flies off, and then they put a bit of, duct tape it back on again or whatever. I mean, it is a little bit like that. Some championships have rules where you're not allowed to sort of lose panels, and you'd get heavily marked down in points if you go into something hard enough to cause damage to a car. That's kind of seen as beyond the line. Some of it, like rubbing a wall, is cool. Crashing into a wall and taking panels off, not so much. It's it's frowned upon by the judges as well. Yeah, because you see a lot of cars with I guess the no bonnet thing. Is that for cooling? No, I'm not entirely sure. I'm probably not the best person to talk to about a lot of the styling choices in drift cars, and especially high level competitive drift cars, because I'm not a massive fan of most of what's out there, to be honest with you. The sort of things poking out of a bonnet, or like you say, a lack of bonnet, or bad wheel fitment or anything like that. It's pretty offensive to my eyes. I know you are particularly keen on wheels and tyres fitting correctly, and spend a lot of time making sure it's... Yeah, and I did always, past the point of using standard rear wheels. We used to swap standard rear wheels onto the car and run standard sized tyres, but have stylish wheels up front, and that looked absolutely terrible. Past that point where you're actually moving into sort of being able to use a cheap remold 225 3518 on the rear of your car, then the fitment sort of became quite important. Nothing bugs you more than doing well at a competition and seeing the photos afterwards and just going, bet. What does my car look like? That photo, you're like, I want to put that on the wall, and then you just, brain is going, nah. Yeah, not for me.
Because I don't know when I first came across Driftworks and some of the builds. I think I've watched some earlier stuff with the AE86. How long have you had that car for now?
I think that build's like 8 or 9 years old, maybe something like that. And we built that because the previous competition car that we were using was Nissan Silvia S15, which is basically like the 200SX S14 models, but a new version, a prettier version. And we had a 2JZ engine in that, but it was mounted through the bulkhead. It was actually pushed through the bulkhead quite far, and with kind of a front mid-engined car.
Right.
And at the end of 2009, I want to say, maybe, they changed the rules to make that illegal for a competition car, which I fully understand because not everybody would do it as safely as we did it with that car and professionally. They had to sort of create a bit of a new rule book that meant that car was no longer eligible to be used in a UK championship. So yeah, we then set about the DW86, as we call it, which is an old 1986 Toyota Corolla, which was kind of merged with, at the time, a UK NASCAR, which is called an ASCAR, an old series that from Rockingham that had become redundant, and the cars had basically sat, and we bought one for an old race car with an LS1 in it for, it was probably about $7,000 back then, and slowly started sort of merging parts into the 86. It was like a massive year-long build to create the chassis to allow the sort of power that we were going to run, and allow us to, more importantly, to run the big wheels that we needed for the grip that we needed, which meant that obviously then coming back to how particular I am with ride height and wheel fitment, the car had to be super low. So the modifications to the chassis to allow that were sort of massive, absolutely massive. And yeah, that then ended up snowballing over the following 3 or 4 years with a couple of revisions that essentially meant that there was none of the original ASCAR parts left in it, aside from the rear Winters live axle, which is an absolutely huge thing. That was probably the only part that remains from the original build, and then everything else has been upgraded to sort of bigger, better, stronger, quave sequential gearbox and 454 LSX engine, but like a built one, so 7.4 litre naturally aspirated engine. And
what
as usual, it just all sort of started to snowball from concept basically.
And then what sort of power numbers and weight with that is that sort of now?
So it's quite very heavy for a Toyota Corolla for an A86. It is 1160 kilos, but it's 720 horsepower in its primo level. It's currently got a slightly downgraded engine in it, which is a mere 670 horsepower, I think, something like that. So it's pretty wild. It's a very wide car, still quite a short wheelbase, even though we've lengthened it substantially to try and calm it down a little bit. But yeah, it's quite a wild ride. It is one of those cars that I still can drive after this many years and get out sort of full of adrenaline, trembling, just going, oh my God. So yeah, a lot of fun. Not the most competitive car, I must say. It's the Silvias are a proven recipe. It's something I knew really well. I knew really well how to set up. This is more spectacle than competitive. People absolutely love it because it just tries to kill me all the time, basically.
Yeah, because I feel like there's been a shift. I've definitely I've seen this in Formula D, but from cars like the Silvia, which I imagine are reasonably nice to drive, to what is the most crazy, stupid, shouldn't work with the most exotic engine combination, and then driving that. That seems to be sort of what's happened to some extent.
Definitely. There's a couple of paths you go down, and one is if you just want to be competitive, then you just choose S15 or an S14 chassis, and you put a 2JZ in it, some kind of substantial gearbox, substantial axle in it. You put Wisefab front and rear suspension on it, with the angle lock kit and the traction kit for the back. And, you know, there's lots of little bits that go in between that, all the supporting stuff. But essentially, that's the recipe that you use to win. And that's what you'll see the likes of James Dean and anybody that you constantly see winning will choose something like that. And then the other option is you choose to stand out, or you choose to do something different that sets you apart. And that's always much more challenging, often much less successful in terms of competitive results. But for me, it's always more enjoyable to do it that way. I have an S15 as well. It's a practice car, sort of 420 horsepower, the normal engine in it, but a forged version, bigger turbo, etc. Quite a sprightly thing. But nowadays that would not be competitive against what's out there at all. It's too heavy. It's not extreme enough. I just have that to sort of enjoy at practice days, or did when we could do practice days, because I actually haven't driven that one for a while. It's, sad times.
And with the DW86, that development over the time, because it's such an iconic car for that community. Mm-hmm. Was that just a forever learning experience of test, brake, fix, drive, test, etc., etc.?
It certainly was, and we're still doing that now. We had a bit of time out again from doing competitive drifting, sort of during lockdown and everything. There wasn't much going on anyway, but I haven't used the car for ages, and we decided to get it out for a special event at Mondello Park in Ireland called LZ Festival a month or so ago, and we were still at the end of the last time we used it. We had a big long list of stuff that we wanted to try to improve to actually get the car to go where I want it to go, because it does at times have a bit of a mind of its own, and with all the grip and all of the power, it's you're hanging on for dear life, and it's taking you around a track. You're doing your best to sort of keep it where it's supposed to go, rather than actually directing it like you would with a normal like an S15 or something. So we were doing that and sort of rebuilt a few bits and pieces on the rear axle just before this big event in Mondello. Made massive improvements to the car, huge improvements to how steerable it was, but it was still a complete animal. Still sort of hanging on for dear life, and I've still, even now after 8 years, got plenty of ideas just of improvements I'd like to make to it, to just make it a slightly better, more comfortable place to drive. To be more accurate, potentially more competitive, but still with that spectacle, the drama that it brings to pretty much every event that it goes to.
And in terms of like how tricky it is to drive, what's the sort of things that make it so challenging?
Primarily, its squareness is a big part of it. The width of the car versus the length. It's a relatively square car, so when you have a perfect contact patch on a live axle, you have kind of almost no deviation from perfect contact patch throughout the entire course. It's extremely grippy, and the difference and how the car reacts to sort of on throttle is absolutely fine. When you need to adjust and sort of a live axle comes into play, old school technology, it can be quite challenging to put it where it needs to go. It can sort of, like I say, have a bit of a mind of its own. And we did make big improvements. I do think we're on the right track with it. But even now, after this many years, I'm still learning things about live axle setup, mostly from sort of drag racing, things like that. Still learning about how to get it to be a little bit similar in how it reacts on and off throttle. That's the big part of it for me. Yeah.
And then, it sounds like it's quite interesting. So are you then reacting to the car a lot, like slightly unexpectedly to the car a lot, versus, I don't know, driving a nice 911 or something? It sort of just does what you want it to do.
You definitely are. There's a lot of steering input in that. If you go back on the channel from years ago, there are a few videos of my S15 and how I used to drive that, which was kind of fingertips on the steering wheel type of stuff, and chuck and catch the steering wheel. Whereas this is more like clawing around constantly. With the in-car from the last event that we did, I was watching it back during the edit that we were doing, and at one point I'm in full drift up against somebody's door while I'm following them, And at some point, my hand ends up on the wrong side of the steering wheel, and I'm actually steering like on the inside of the steering wheel, just like flailing about. Which is, I imagine it's not the first time it's happened, but it was the first time I caught it on camera.
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
What is going on with this thing? It's absolutely hilarious.
Your brain's having an absolute fit trying to just keep up with.
Yeah.
So you're probably a good person to ask this question. If you're driving a car and not necessarily intentionally drifting, I don't know, maybe you're on a track and it breaks loose more than you would expect, and you've got to apply more than, let's say, a sort of full left rotation. Yeah. What do you do? Do you automatically let go, or do you keep? How do you deal with that situation?
It completely depends on the circumstance of what you're aiming towards when that's happening. For one. But in general, my hope would be that if you've got that amount of steering lock, you're in a place where it's relatively safe to have that amount of steering lock. And as long as you kept your foot planted to the throttle, you could pretty much steer out of it and straighten up if you needed to, or give it that extra kick and send it a bit more sideways. And then you can do the old catch and hold technique on certain cars. It's sort of, it's very difficult on some. They obviously react very differently. 911s are notoriously hard to drift, and that is accurate, especially old ones. New ones, not so much. The 992 GT3 is quite enjoyable on the limits. It gives you a bit of a false sense of security when it comes to how much angle you can push, because you run out of steering lock quite quickly on that car as well. But the choices are kind of determined by what's in front of you and whether you want to style it out or straighten up, I guess.
And is it interesting driving lots of competition cars and cars that have been built for drifting, and then at the same time having road cars and probably doing the odd drift every now and then? Like, does that translate very nicely, or is there sometimes things you pick up from doing too much of one that isn't great to do in the other?
I think from my angle, having done very little, in fact next to no track driving at all before I started drifting, that was how I learned to drive on track. It was on drift days. So I think that it translates really well into track driving. I love track driving. That's what I do nowadays. I don't really do much drifting at all, really. But yeah, track days are kind of my fun thing. And I think that what I learned in drifting gives me the ability to escape bad situations perhaps better than some other people. It gives me the comfort to push a little bit harder in some areas, to ruin tyres if I feel like it, which is fun. And for the most part, it puts a smile on people's faces. You do get sort of the end of the scale where, you've done a few laps of a wet Donington and you know that the marshals are having a good laugh watching you, and then it ends in a black flag. That was in my 997 GT3. Back in the day, I was, how am I getting away with this? How am I being allowed to do this? Oh, no, I'm not being allowed to do this anymore, because I just pushed that little bit too hard on that one. No spinning, but yeah, definitely. It's where I get a lot of enjoyment even on a track day, which is why my choice is always a rear-wheel drive car. Even if it's for a grip track day car, it'll be rear-wheel drive.
Yeah. So you had a 907.2 GT3 for a long time.
I've still got it.
Did you sell it and buy it back?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So I sold it. I can't remember how. It was 2010. The car was 2010, so I must have bought it in late 2012. Owned it for about a year and a half, and I'd done quite a bit of work to it, including putting a lightweight flywheel in it. Okay. And a silly heavy clutch that it didn't need. And then I tore my calf muscle running.
Oh, no.
And my left calf muscle. So that versus clutch meant that wasn't the ideal car for me to own then. So I decided to get rid of it. But then kept in contact with the guy I sold it to, and he had it for 5 or 6 years. I jokingly put up an Instagram post saying, remember this day when this was in the workshop. I think it was on the ramp. I'd owned it for half a day or something, and I was already fiddling about underneath it. Yeah. And he just messaged saying, you can have it back if you want. I was like, oh wait, hang on a minute. That sounds like a great idea. So yeah, I've now owned that for 2 or 3 years again. And it's one of those ones because it's Riviera Blue Club Sport. The spec of it,
it's super nice.
Yeah, it's I get asked a lot about selling it, which I don't want to do. So I've managed to put people off recently by giving them a price of how much I'd sell it for.
Oh, okay. So
they soon go away then, which is great. So I've got that, and then the 992 GT3 as well, which I'm lucky enough to own as well.
How do those two compare? And do you get different things out of each car?
I really, really do. They're obviously from, they're the same thing essentially, and the recipe for naturally aspirated rear-wheel drive track car is the same throughout. One of them is the last Metzger 3.8, apart from the RS that are made in that year, and manual as well. The other is PDK, because I daily drive the car. It's, of all my cars, that's the one that I'll end up in every day if I can. But on track, they're wildly different. The 997 on the edge is a bit bitey, like the old school cars, but not as bad as the 964. But the 992 is just unbelievably comfortable at speed, like really, really high speed, and giving you the feedback that you want. It wrecked me a little bit, as often throughout owning various cars. I've got a new car, and it's kind of, I say it's wrecked me because it's given me a new perspective on cars for the future, and everything that I've done in the past kind of feels massively inferior.
Yeah.
And that's what happened when I got into the GT3. Well, it happened first with getting into E46 M3 back in the day, and then progressed into the 997 GT3, and that really just changed the game for me. And I had a 991 GT3 as well. PDK, absolutely adored that car. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. The only reason I sold it was because I put a deposit down on a new GT3, but that then took 6 years to get. I put a deposit down, and it took 6 years to actually get the new GT3. But still very lucky to own the two. It's kind of almost unfortunate that 997 is worth so much money nowadays, because I worry about driving it a bit more than I used to. Bizarrely, the 992 I'll smash about everywhere, take it anywhere, do pretty much anything in it. But the old enemy road salt is a little bit more concerning nowadays for the 997, so I don't drive it quite as much in winter. I choose my days very carefully, and it's kind of currently set up more as a road car with Pilot Sport 4S's on it rather than Cup 2s. I have the Cup 1s for it, the original ones, but I've done
they were those. A bit dicey.
Yeah, well, I think the ones that are on it currently on those wheels are about 12 years old as well, so they're absolutely lethal. But yeah, in terms of driving dynamics, it's kind of similar in a way. I do really enjoy manual cars on track, but the PDK is an unbelievable weapon as well. It's such an enjoyable car to drive.
It's an interesting one, that one, because what have I driven? I've driven a 992 PDK, but on the road, and then I've got a 997 Gen 2 RS, 3.8.
Very nice.
That I've had for 9 years or something now, and I've got a bit of that, like what you're saying with your 997, where I used to just drive it all the time, whatever, happy days, and it's gone up in value, which is great. No worries whatsoever. But I'm also now more aware that it's a bit older, and I just don't drive it anywhere near as much. I think I'm also changing as a person. I like slightly less day to day. I like slightly less hardcore stuff. I just want to be.
I'm kind of with you. I've sort of held on for dear life, trying to keep my youth. But yeah, there's definitely something to be said for having a slightly more comfortable car. In fact, actually, I'd say that in terms of road noise and general driving, the 997 is a quieter car to be in than the 992. The 992 is incredibly harsh in terms of cabin noise, and it's not a stiff car. It's not like overly firm in terms of suspension, but you definitely feel everything, you hear everything, and it's not the one to have a particularly nice stereo in and listen to
you can't hear that much
audio or anything like that. You enjoy the sound of the engine and driving. and sort of holding gears a little bit longer than you normally would and things like that.
Yeah. I felt like I was surprised with 991 actually, how loud the in-car engine noise was on 991, Gen 2s and stuff. And then 992, I felt like 992 GT3 was more similar to my RS than previous GT3s.
I'm totally with you. Yeah, it feels I'm not really bothered about ever getting the RS because I'm more into sort of the road side of a GT3 ownership. But the 992 is very RS-y in terms of its feel, its noise, its level of comfort, etc. It can still do everything you need to as a road car. But yeah, it definitely felt like they'd brought the RS into the GT3 more than ever.
Yeah.
If it was my choice as a road car, I'd definitely have a bit more sound insulation in there.
100%.
Because I do daily drive the car, like I say, whenever I can. And it's definitely notable, especially motorway journeys. It's a very, very loud car to be in, to the point where I've questioned whether I should just have like a Turbo S instead, but I would miss the engine. The NA engine is everything.
It's really tricky, isn't it? I have a 991.2 GTS at the moment as my sort of daily-ish. And even that's like kind of annoyingly too loud. And I ordered a 992, but I think actually weirdly it's not going to come through because the production's going to end before my car kind of exists. And anyone that listens to this podcast will have this topic done to death, so apologies. But you can spec noise isolating windows
you can,
in the 992. I don't think you can on GT3, but on all the other ones, it's like slightly actually, I think they're thinner, weirdly. It's the lightweight noise. They've got a film in the middle of them, and it knocks the decibels down a little bit. What else I hear recently? Spike Farriston, I don't know if you've come across him, American guy. He has a 992 GT3, and I believe it was on whatever tyres it came, and he's changed them to Pirelli PZ4. I think they're PZ4s, and I think you can get them on the turbo.
Yeah.
And he said they're noticeably. Now I need to talk to someone who knows about the specific tyres. He said they're noticeably quieter.
Yeah.
And he said he has a touring. He said it's gone from it's too loud to this is not so bad.
Yeah. You notice the difference straight away just putting P4Ss on. A road tyre is a big part of designing a road tyre, I think, is noise. It's high up there in what matters. But yeah, Cup 2s, they're pretty bad. Cup 1s back in the day were absolutely awful. And basically anything with more rubber touching the ground in general will always just transmit more resonance, more harmonic resonance through into the shock absorbers, into the cabin, and just everything resonates like that. But that's interesting because, like I say, I do tend to use my the 992 quite a lot on the road. So it's on. There was the old tyre roulette when you actually got your car back in the day. So fully expecting Cup 2s, turned up and I had the what are they, the P0, the Corsas? So I had those on. Proper disappointment.
That's really annoying, isn't it?
Because I just felt, I've always just trusted Michelin, track tyres essentially. Yeah. But they were absolutely phenomenal. The first time I used that car on track, I was absolutely blown away by how good they were, how well they handled heat. So yeah, maybe I'll stick with that one. Maybe go even more road tyre if I do burn through this set anytime soon.
That's it. That's like on my RS, I want to put it on a set of 4Ss or something. It's on Cup 2s at the moment, and I've got to wait till I run these tyres out, and they last forever.
They really do, don't they? They don't come with a great deal of tread, but yeah, they last really well during normal driving circumstances. Definitely. The one thing I will say though is the P4Ss. I have used the 997 on track with the P4Ss, and they're just crap. They are. Yeah. They'll hang on for a couple of laps, and it's okay. But yeah, you just end up torturing the tyre. You can feel them rolling the tread blocks. Yeah. And it's kind of the last place I drove that hard was at Spa. It was a good choice because I had no idea what the weather was going to do, and sort of gave me a little bit of both worlds. But unfortunately, it was nice and dry, and the tyres were just not up to the job of a track like that. So I would say, road tyres, but just swap on something decent if you're actually going to use it on track, definitely.
Yeah, and they'd last. Like Cup 2s can deal. You're not just going to melt them and kill them.
Unless you do drifting like my mate Al in his 996. We ran out of tyres quite quickly one day at Donington, and that was I think it was my first go in the 992, and he was following me or swapping, and he was in his 996 GT3 as well. But that got a little bit leery, and he may or may not have driven home on the cords. Good times.
One of my early track experiences was in my RS, and took it to Goodwood, and the tyres were quite low, and I didn't really think about it much, but it rained, and then combined like track with like rubber on the track, and then rain and no grip. I had some proper, especially like just proper heart in mouth. I'm gonna die. Managed to survive, and then
you really know about it when those cars step on you with all the grip that they have, and I'd say all the tyre width. There's not a lot of progression not a lot of time to catch something like that when it does start to get a bit wild.
You've got a really cool collection. I say collection, I just mean a group of, I don't know whether you call it a collection, of cars. Most of them I look at and go, yes, that is, I love what you've done. Whether it's so you've got an E30 M3 that is a track car.
Yeah, and that's my track car, that one,
messed with quite a bit.
Yep, it's basically taken. The concept was to have an E30 M3 shell. I'll emphasise that it started life as a shell. I did not take an S14 engine out of a lovely mint E30 M3. I had it was a shell, and it's got the running gear engine and drivetrain out of the E92 M3, so the last naturally aspirated M3 engine ever made. It had DCT. We are currently, as those of you that follow us on YouTube, are in the process of removing the DCT and putting it in the bin, because it's caused us nothing but drama for sort of 5 years. And that is purely just because of the aftermarket control of it. It's all, a DCT E90 M3 or E92 M3, fantastic place to be, one of my favourite cars. It's just never worked in this particular car with the management that we're using, etc. So that's currently going in the bin, and it's having a Drenth sequential put in it as well. Because again, sort of its use changed. Initially, it was going to be kind of a road car that I used on track, but I love it so much. It's my favourite thing to steer I've ever made by a very long way. It's just resigned to pure track car duties now, so I can just have the noisy sequential in it.
Why do you think it's so, you enjoy it so much?
It's purely balance, I think. I mean, a big part of it is because I kind of have made / touched every single component on that car and designed it to work in a way that I want it to, based on everything that I've learned over the years through building whatever car it may be, from previous track cars to even drift cars or anything like that. And it just steers on the edge, on very minute slip angle. It steers beautifully. It's perfect in terms of its balance front and rear. It doesn't drift unless provoked. It doesn't understeer unless provoked. It really requires your attention to drive, and it's just phenomenally quick. One of my favourite moments in it is chasing down a Gen 2 991 GT3 RS at Donington, and lap after lap after lap, just staying up his chuff, and the guy coming over afterwards in that normal way of like just going, what the is in this? What have you done to this? Things like that make me smile a lot when it's something that I've made as well, and made work that well. It's quite important.
And I guess, do you like that kind of, not quite underdog, but vibe of a car that everyone looks at it and goes, okay, well, with all your cars, there's something going on because they all look something's going on with them, but like it's got a crazy engine versus what it should normally have, and therefore everyone's kind of shocked by it.
sort of the surprise element is a good thing. It's always enjoyable. Not to be mean about anything at all, because obviously that was a well-driven GT3 RS. It was a fantastic car. I just sort of, the fact that in the initial concept was the car was the reason why that E30 M3 is blue is because it's Riviera blue, and the reason it's Riviera blue is because I decided to build that car because I'd used the 997 GT3 back in the day for track days, and I think I'd done 2 track days. I'd done a set of brake pads. I'd done nearly 2 sets of tyres, and I'd smashed a windscreen on it, just having a chip come up on track. Yeah. And it was such expensive track daying. I decided that, I'd step into something that, it's an E30 M3, it's an amazing thing, but it's kind of something that I was going to make, and I wouldn't be in too much trouble if I binned it. Yeah. It would be repairable at all times. I wouldn't need to worry quite so much about it depreciating or anything like that. So that's how that started and why it ended up being Riviera Blue as well. Yeah,
that's something I realised as I started doing a bit of racing and ended up getting a race car and stuff like that. The road cars, I took them on track like every now and then, just to, if I get a car, I've kind of got to take it on track at some point just to see how it goes, push the limits a bit and whatever, and then normally just go back onto the road and it may not go on the track again, because the idea of going in the gravel in something that's got nice paint and you look at and you're like, oh yeah, those wheels look great. Yeah. Then you send it into the gravel and you get a massive bill versus something built for it. It's quite a different experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know whether you're the same as me, but I have to stop myself before I end up in that situation as well, because the moment I'm in that situation with that car on track, and especially when you're surrounded by your friends going fast or people sort of in equivalent cars, you kind of forget every little bit of common sense. It's just a bloke thing, I guess, maybe, but an ego thing, fun, maybe, I don't know. But it's just fun. And sometimes I'd manage to just stop myself and just go, well, we're partway through the track day here. You don't need to bring it out to the end of the track day. You've had loads of fun and you haven't crashed your 250,000 quid GT3. So just call it there and go home. And I guess that comes with age a little bit as well. I used to be a lot less sensible with the choices that I made, but I also used to be in much more affordable sort of normal cars as well back then.
And ultimately, at some point, you are going to come unstuck.
Yeah, it has to happen.
And you learn that.
Everyone. Yeah.
Or didn't this happen to you? It's people like other stuff that's not in your control happens on tracks. Did you have someone in a car spin in front of you? Was it in the M3?
That was in the E30, yes. That was in the M3. And we were on a big Silverstone track day, and it was a 996 GT2. I was absolutely gutted about the whole situation, but I sort of made some bad decisions to slow down and let somebody pass. He didn't go past until actually on the corner. Then when he accelerated, he span out in front of me, and I thought I could make it past him, and I couldn't. So one of those things that in sort of the 10 plus years I've been doing track days and never having an incident, you keep that in your mind that one day just something will happen, things will align, and you will end up in contact with something or somebody at some point. It has to happen, regardless of how skillful you think you are or not. It will happen. Yeah,
someone could drop some fluids. These things do happen, and unfortunately, is what it is. What other stuff? I'm on your Instagram having a look through. We'll talk about the Murcielago in a bit. 964 turbo thing.
Yeah. So that's a car that we flew over to Japan. I bought and flew over to Japan and drove that through Japan, sort of 1,000 kilometers with my wife. Sort of big memories car. That one really nice before shipping it back. It's a tuner car from Japan built by Promodet and Rauwelt, quite famous. Body kit designer, aero designer over there. So the bodywork is done by Rauwelt at Rauwelt headquarters. But it's different to most of them because it's a smooth fender kit. So it's a wide body kit that's only ever so slightly wider than the original turbo arches as well, because it was an original 964 turbo 3.3. But that thing, again, I got wildly carried away with over the 5+ years that I've owned it. And it's now an absolutely terrifying 640 horsepower family transport. It's got a baby seat in the back of it. So a lot of my cars I struggle because they don't have 3 seats or 4 seats.
Yeah.
So this one was the one that I do take the little one out in the back, family days out, but you obviously don't get to wind it up, particularly when she's in the car.
Yeah.
But then I've had a few goes out in it recently because it's kind of coming up to winter and I probably won't be driving it too much. Few spirited drives, and that thing is wildly dangerous. it is so quick, and it's such a beautiful car. But when you're sitting inside it, I'm just always its envision at all times is how thin the A-pillar is. And that's the giveaway of an old car. And it basically, with your slightly older, sensible brain in gear, you just remind yourself that this would be a really, really bad thing to crash, like a really bad thing. And it's a 200 mile an hour capable old school car. So it's extremely enjoyable, but just completely bonkers. It's kind of not really for anything in particular as well, which is kind of the same with Murcielago. It's just built because it's fun to build and fun to do something that's just a little bit that I hadn't done before, and it's a little bit out there for me as well.
Yeah. So where did that one come from? Because both of those have got Le Mans GT vibes.
Yeah.
And so where did the concept for the Murcielago? I mean, obviously, you sort of pick up where the inspiration came from, but at what point did you go, let's make this?
I try and think back and think how I actually persuaded myself, how I actually man-logicked my way through this being a good idea. And it was done incrementally with just little decisions here or there. And obviously, I'm not really a supercar guy. I never really have been. I've never really thought I'd be in a position to own anything like that in the first place as a completely standard car. But lucky enough I was. It needed quite a bit of work doing to it. It was a very bad condition. It was what was at the time Cat C car, so it's a crash damaged car, badly repaired, and I did a lot to it to sort of make it a nice, relatively normal but stylish Murcielago. It's an LP640 as well. And then once I owned it, I was obsessing more and more over the things that made me want to own it in the first place, and that came back to I think it's a Belgian hill climb video on YouTube of the Writer Engineering RGT cars, with fully open exhausts, making more volume than should be allowed, but the best noise I'd ever heard of any car that ever existed, as far as I was concerned at the moment. And there's just a little thing that sparks in my brain that, like, if it exists, if they can do that with a race car, would it be possible to make something inspired by? Because I'd always call things that I do like that inspired by, and create a road car version of it. Yeah. So it's a long, long road to actually ending up with a car that looked like that. The mechanical side of things, I decided to make my own V12 ITB setup for it, because it's got like a really big aluminium airbox on it with quad throttle bodies, which really takes away any induction noise out of that car. So I created this custom ITB intake for it. And I was talking to Writer Engineering, who make the RGT cars and GT1 cars, and I had this picture that I'd had as my desktop for years, and it was of this particular grey. It was kind of the mule of the latter generation LP640 GT1 version, so the Le Mans version of the car. And I'd had this picture on my desktop for ages, and I'd look at it casually, and then ended up talking to Writer Engineering about something. I can't remember whether it was the headers, maybe it was the manifolds, maybe. And then I was just like, have you got any panels? And they happen to have, they've got a large stock of used, previously damaged panels that they send back to the manufacturer and have repaired. And this particular set of panels were from I think it's the 2009 Into Progress Bank Le Mans car. So front wings, front fenders, whatever you want to call them, side skirts, front bumper, rear bumper, and the slightly narrower rear wing. And they were like, you can't fit these to a road car. And I was like, well, let's just get them here and like, I'll see whether we can make it work or not. And ended up doing the deal, got the bits. It took quite a while, got them here. And they 100% did not even slightly fit or there was no way at all they were ever going to work on the car. But just through stubbornness, I kind of decided to make the first cut of the front part of the chassis and the structure of the car and rebuild it to try and make these panels work. And then sort of 2 years down the line from that point, and more work than anybody would probably ever believe for a quote unquote body kit, because it's called that by quite a lot of people. It's like, I want to fit the GT1 body kit to my Murcielago. It's like, well, it's about as far away from a body kit as you can possibly imagine. It is reinvent your car type of thing. New doors, new door hinges, new structure to support all of that. Clearance for the front wheels was the biggest problem, because on a standard Murcielago, when you lower it enough to make this kit work, the door hinges are just right in the way. Right. The whole way the scissor doors work, the whole structure for that, everything's in the way. So you just have to chop it out and reinvent it. That's massively complicated engineering exercise. Yeah. And then everything that you do, obviously you choose to do one thing, that gives you then 10 more jobs after that to sort of get back to the point that you were before. Yeah. Very, very big project. Very, very big. Would you do it again? Absolutely not, had I known. But I love the end result. It's everything I hoped it would be, and probably a little bit more. But that's thanks to also the people that helped me do it. So our neighbours next door at Dynatalk, Craig Taylor, and Gaz from TGL Bodyworks, who basically had it in his place for nearly 2 years, sorting out all the lines and making it look all perfect, all the structure. He did the hinges as well, because we'd already had one attempt at them for the doors. Just made everything right. And it kind of looks like it's meant to be like that. But the details that you can't see, or you can when you open the door, that's what really took the time to make right. And also the race panels as well, they're terrible quality. Okay. It looks fantastic in a photograph at Le Mans from, taken from, I don't know, 100 meters away. But you get up close to this stuff, and it's race car parts, and it's not just race car parts, it's race car parts before they did CAD design on panels and things like that. So everything's got a handmade element to it. And then in addition to that, it had also been crashed. A lot of the parts had. So they needed significant work to make right.
Now, having sort of been through that process, would you go, if you were doing it again, would you sort of scan a car and make your own panels or something instead? Or if knowing what I know now, I just don't think I would do it. Yeah. I've been in this situation many times before with all of my builds, where they all escalate and it all gets a bit silly and it gets a bit much at times. But then at the end of it, you're really happy with the end result. And, that is how this one has worked. But this was so extreme and such a lot of work and time and stress. I'm just not sure whether another one of those could ever exist. Yeah. And lots of people have contacted me. Some of the big YouTubers, or pretty much any supercar YouTuber you can imagine, has kind of been in contact, sort of asking whether they can get to the body kit. Yeah. And stuff like that. And it's such a long road to explain in detail why it's not just that. The only way to do it is by watching our boring videos of us building the car on YouTube. There's a massive playlist, and it was kind of one of the first times that I picked up the camera to do YouTubing as it's known today. It's some of it's highly technical and rather dull. But it kind of does tell the story, watching throughout, of some of the trials and tribulations of what it took to get the car looking like it does now, sitting there looking pretty. In its perfect Instagram pub photos. It looks so sick. Yeah, I saw it at a Supercar Driver event, I think,
Yeah.
And yeah, it looks so badass and sounds.
It just looks like it shouldn't be on the road.
Awesome.
Is the thing. It just looks like the race car with no livery, which was exactly what I go for in a lot of my stuff, is to make it look like it's kind of not meant to be there. Kind of a race car is on the road, but looks well made as well. Not like race cars generally are.
Yeah. When you start looking at them, you're like,
Yeah.
this is like, it's designed to be taken off and put back on again really quickly, and that's about it. I saw one of the GT1 cars at a Spa Classic a while, like a few years ago now. Did you go to an event recently and drive with some of the race cars?
I was invited by Writer Engineering, because it's quite a mad thing. After putting the pictures and videos out of the car being complete, we have received an email from a random guy called Luke Donkewalt, who is the original Murcielago designer. He designed the Murcielago, and he also worked with Writer Engineering to design the RGT and GT1 cars. And he sent me a personal email, just essentially just saying, what you've done is absolutely sick. It's made me go back to my archives of the old stuff that I used to do with Lamborghini, because it doesn't work with them anymore, obviously. And so that was number one amazing thing that happened with that car. And the second was the response from Writer Engineering, from Hans Reiter. He absolutely adores the car, and he invited me to just come and park it with his four or five RGT and RSVs that they were taking to this Spa 24 Hour. And some of them were supposed to be racing. They had some issues, but I was just invited as a guest there to park my silly little road car next to these iconic race cars that were the reason why I built this thing in the first place. So massive dream come true. There was no driving involved at it. It was obviously a big race weekend, but just being invited to be there and being alongside those cars was absolutely surreal. Like,
that's so cool.
Mental. And again, we filmed the whole thing. It's a little bit of a weird one, because most of the stuff that we do, it's either highly technical sort of builds of cars, or it's using the cars on track. This was a little bit strange, because we were just taking a car to an event, but it was an amazing event, and the reason we were taking it there was super cool. So big memory for me, that one. Definitely.
Yeah, that is, the whole thing kind of coming full circle. Super cool. How have you found the whole YouTube? You've been on it for a while now.
Yeah, well, we've had a Driftworks YouTube channel for years, for as long as I can remember with the business, but it was more back then about putting videos on YouTube as a way to then put them onto forums, to show people on forums. So it was not the same thing that it is now. I do really enjoy YouTube. I would say I'm not a particularly good YouTuber, because I'm a bit too old, not enthusiastic enough, slightly anxious and stuff. But I try and sort of just show what I'm doing. I don't make anything for YouTube. I just think people sort of show an interest in how I get to the point where, you've got a Murcielago, a car show, what it actually takes to get there, or even just a small snippet of what it actually takes. Because, as I freely admit in a lot of our videos, a lot of the time, like we were talking about earlier, if something's kind of annoying you just put it away. And sometimes the camera can really add extra stress to a build that I'm not doing for YouTube. And people badger me, they give me loads of shit over it sometimes. Well, why haven't we seen an update on this, that and the other? But sometimes you just have to step away from that and actually get the job done. Yeah. Because I'm doing that, but I'm also still running a business as well. Sort of have quite important stuff to do at times. I'd love to spend every moment I have in the workshop, because I really, really do enjoy doing this. But it's just not possible. Not quite yet, anyway. We do lots of builds and track days and sort of adventures with friends and stuff. But I guess the core side of it is showing the car builds, the whatever work we're doing to the E30 M3 at the moment is going on there. 964 turbo, we covered a lot of that. yeah, it's just a great little community, and it's a little bit of what I think that we lost with, the old fogey here of what we lost from forums back in the day.
Yeah.
Sort of having sort of that community feel and contributing a little bit, stuff that you've lost with all the other social media platforms. I don't think.
Yeah,
it's not a patch on what you used to have as a forum that helped you your builds and create friendships and stuff like that.
Has that been throughout the process a really big part of the company and marketing as well? Having, whether posting your stuff on forums about what you've built or videos and things, has that really sort of brought the whole thing up? It
definitely has, and it's pretty much 100% of marketing is to not do any marketing. It's to just do what we enjoy doing, to just build cars. And as I say, none of it has ever been built with an audience in mind. It's just doing what you are passionate about. I think that's really important. I think that's what I get through watching other good YouTubers, whether it's to do with cars or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's just being genuinely into something. That's why people enjoy watching other people, if they're genuinely passionate. And I think one thing that's YouTube's been really helpful with is people understanding that I'm a genuine car guy.
Yeah.
I can put pictures on Instagram, and somebody new comes to see my Instagram, they just might think I'm just some rich guy who spends, silly amounts of money on silly cars or having them built. What they don't realise there is that often I've done a huge amount of the actual work on those cars as well. And that's the bit that I really enjoy. And the design side of things and the obsessing over things every evening of how you're going to fix that thing the next day or the next 6 months, bigger plans. So, I think that's really helped people understand that Driftworks was built out of genuine enthusiasm, not ever expecting to make enough money to buy supercars or anything like that. It's always just been incrementally just doing stuff, and it seems that people like it, and then hopefully people like us enough to come and buy stuff from our shop, and then that allows us to do more silly stuff. So it's kind of worked for years. Traditional marketing gone out the window. Just do what you enjoy and show people. It seems to work.
And well. You saying you don't think you're a very good YouTuber, I think exactly what you've described is what makes you very good at what you do, is because you care about it. The reason you're doing it is you're super passionate about it, and it only takes like a few minutes, a minute of listening to one of your videos, and you can see you, the person. Now, whether, I'm sure, we're all a bit different all the time, but like you immediately, you're looking at something and you're like, oh, I want to fix that. I want to change that. We've been working on this. This has been like 10 hours in the whatever. Like you can get a small capture, even in like a few minutes, of what your whole attitude is about. And I think that probably helps people, get behind it and whatnot.
It's definitely a very specific audience in terms of what the standard watcher of YouTube might be. We're down the path, and then some to sort of the slightly more techie, nerdy, and being British is quite an interesting thing for a lot of people in YouTube land as well. It's quite difficult to succeed for many people outside of your homeland. But we definitely like to. I've just decided to stick to what we do. We don't play the YouTube game in terms of chasing algorithms, and we're not particularly good at doing things that are clickbaity or anything like that might draw a bigger audience towards us. But that also works for us because you don't want somebody to be tricked into coming to your channel and then they're bored to tears by the first 20 words that you've said. It kind of works, and it's steadily been growing. We're still relatively small for what we do for the content that we put out. We've just made it to 200,000 followers, I think, recently. Nice. So big milestone for us. I'm very happy with that. And I'll just continue doing it as I can and when I can, because like I say, I do enjoy sharing the reality of these builds with people, because it's not just about chucking a checkbook at somebody. Checkbooks don't really exist anymore, do they? Chucking a bank transfer.
Like, what the hell do I do with that?
But It's a big part of what I do daily in terms of my of planning for it, but actually picking up the camera is quite rare. Sometimes I just crack on.
Yeah. What does your sort of day to day you like look like? What does a day with Phil look like? I imagine it varies quite a bit.
It does, but it always starts at the moment with a 2.5-year-old little girl coming waking us up in the morning at 5:30. So she is my latest project and my most important project. So yeah, a lot of what I do nowadays is always with her in mind. So my days sort of become shorter at work, a lot shorter.
Yeah.
So I'll try and spend time in the morning and then collect her from nursery after work. Yeah, I don't get to spend as much time in the evenings in the workshop as I used to, but I think that's probably a good thing, especially for a man my age now as well. So yeah, I do a lot of work when I get up with her, with breakfast in the morning, sort of the laptop-based work, and then I can go in and I've got good people that work for me now. I don't manage every fine detail in the business anymore. I've got a good team of people that work for us. And yeah, spend some time in the workshop where I can with my buddy Jay, who helps me out in there as well.
Yeah. How do you find having a large amount of cars now? I don't know.
Pain in the ass.
Got quite a few. Yeah. Are you constantly trying to go like, is this ridiculous? This is a pain. I don't know where to put them all. And like, should I just sell all of them? That
question, yeah, it's crossed my mind quite a few times as how to deal with the scale of it. But again, with sort of the knowledge that I've gained over the years of dealing with projects and how demanding they can be on you mentally, financially, and otherwise, the way that I do things now works really well for me because I don't work to a deadline. I'm not working to a SEMA build or getting to this show or whatever other nonsense that makes people rush and makes people not do as good a job as they possibly could. I work to my own timetable, and if something needs more time or needs completely reassessing and needs some outside help, it'll just get sort of pushed to the back of the workshop for a bit. We've got these amazing car lifts that we built, storage ramps, so we can store sort of reasonable quantity of cars at the unit now. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. It has been challenging before, trying to juggle multiple big projects where you think you've kind of got hold on the individual cars, and then all of a sudden something will happen, like an engine will blow up or something's gone catastrophically wrong with that build. And finances are not unlimited, despite what people like to think. It's quite difficult. That's the other thing. A lot of the cars are my own as well. They're not to do with the business. It's pure passion of like whatever kind of comes out of the business. A lot of it personally will go back into doing something dumb with the car anyway. So yeah, again, just sort of learnt over the years to just calm down and not work to anybody else's deadline. If you can't do that right now, don't stress out about it too much. It doesn't really matter. It'll still be there in 6 months.
It's a really interesting one actually. Like, is it SEMA at the moment? I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but you see so many builds and I hear so many stories of things getting like mad rush to be at SEMA. And I sort of think about it a bit like with things like Geneva Motor Show and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you unveil something that you've built and put a lot of time into, if you have a social media platform, and particularly you should probably be documenting it throughout the process because that's actually what everyone wants to see. Unveiling it in a room full of other people unveiling their stuff doesn't sound like a very good way of going about it.
Not to me at all. And you know, I've been asked about, particularly about Murcielago, like, are you bringing it to SEMA? I was like, hell no, why would I do that? I mean, if somebody, somebody big, a massive sponsor wanted to come on board and just handle the whole thing, then I'd let it go. I have let it go to an event before where I wasn't attending in Poland, Ultrace it was called. But yeah, the whole idea of a SEMA build is pretty dreadful to me. It just makes, the first thing it makes me think is that, well, that car's not going to be built properly. It's going to be built to look like it's done properly. And you look at the details of a lot of these cars that turn up to these shows and blow people's minds with whatever engine swap or build they've done. And anybody who actually knows about cars can look at that picture and go, well, that doesn't run. That hasn't even got a water hose on it. That's got no radiator. That's got no anything. Literally, like, so how hard is it to make sort of a pretty looking thing and plonk a mental looking engine into the hole that is the engine bay? That's not hard at all. That's really quite easy to do. The difficulty is in actually making something functional that works, that drives into the show, which I know some people do. It's not everybody who does SEMA builds badly, but yeah, it's not something that I'd be keen on, especially, like I said before, having a deadline that's not my own. Yeah. I don't like, it's a bit of a weird thing working for other people, is like having a boss again for me. Yeah. That's why I've never been very good with having sponsors on race cars or anything like that, because I worked pretty hard to run my own business and run my own life in the way that I want it. And having somebody who sort of is making decisions, or not even requests, almost demands on you, I've never been particularly keen on it. So do things my own way, in my own time.
It is a really tricky sort of balancing act, because I have sponsors for the podcast who absolutely, I've tried to get the right people, and they really very much like help it work. But it is that thing of, sometimes, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I just want to do something different. And I'm now like, well, I kind of have an obligation to these people. And I kind of, and hopefully it all grows and it gets bigger and you get bigger sponsors. And then you're like, well, okay, is there something is there some way I can link this that it just all works without me having to be responsible for that side of it? Like promote your own business or whatever, rather than promoting someone else's.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of just comes out of being a good businessman as well, and doing the right thing by people as well, which is super important. It's just sort of the whole sort of reporting back to people with the cars, and allowing them to make decisions on what I do with my car. It's something I learnt from the early days. I was not particularly comfortable with, and I had very good sponsors, and I do have good sponsors still who support the YouTube channel and things like that. But they're just guys who they understand that just letting me crack on and do what I do in some way has some value to them.
And I think that's becoming a much more valuable sort of thing. It's like associating with people because of the right reasons, rather than, I get loads of emails, you must get a bazillion from random companies being like, can you just advertise this thing on your channel? And you're like, no one's going to buy it, right?
Yeah.
No one cares.
How do you think that's going to work? I don't understand it. Yeah. I get it. I get kind of in in America, advertising is very different over there. Very different. With stuff. So I do understand sort of why the paid mentions in YouTube videos and stuff works over there. It makes me cringe, but I totally get it. It works for that market, and they have a very different level of comfort with having stuff rammed down their throats in terms of advertising over there as well. It's very, very different. Yeah, we're a bit too British, perhaps.
And you can do it. It just requires a lot more in-depth and work with the right people on the right project and whatnot. Have you, because people have seen the builds of all these cars and the work that goes in and stuff, have you found when you try and move them in, move them on, I don't know whether have you sold any of the sort of bigger personal car projects ever? Is there, does that be relatively easy or not?
No, nothing substantial. And I'd be incredibly uncomfortable doing it. I've had offers for stuff, reasonably substantial offers for more recently, like the 964 Turbo over the past few years. Murcielago, questions are limited on that one. Lots of people are super keen, then find out that you built it right-hand drive, so it's no good to the biggest audience for that type of thing. But yeah, I've never had to do it, but I'd also be probably quite uncomfortable doing it, because all the little things that with the Murcielago build, for example, it's the first time I've ever done that. It's massively complicated. The end result looks fantastic, but actually there's a little bit in the back of my head that wants to pull the whole car apart again and do some things in a slightly different way. And they don't they don't eat away at me because, like I say, the end result is fantastic. But if I was to ever consider selling that to somebody, I'd either have to document all of my thoughts and issues and get them to acknowledge this, that, and the other. My fear is that, you know, if somebody would take something apart, it happens between garage to garage with a lot of cars from time to time. You have work done at one garage, something is wrong, you go to another garage to go, I can't believe that garage has done all of that stuff. Well, that would definitely happen with if somebody wanted to pick apart my build, the GT1 build in particular. They would definitely be able to pick flaws in the way we've done stuff, but it had to happen that way because there was no other way for me to do it, because it's the first time I've done it and it's the only way that I knew how to do it at that time. So yeah, I wouldn't be particularly keen on selling anything that I own. Not the 964 Turbo would be, it's a lot more like a kind of normal build. There's so many of those sort of highly modified 964 Turbos in the world. Nothing that I've done is massively new or spectacular. It's just done, executed in a pretty nice way, in my opinion. So I wouldn't be worried about that. But I've sold a drift car in the past, a very complicated drift car. But I usually end up kind of coming full circle and questioning whether I should have that back at some point as well. Even stuff that would be of no use to me nowadays.
Yeah, and I guess like with the Murcielago, there was a real like vision, inspiration behind the build. You've put so many hours and personal time and effort into the build, and then you've had some cool stuff around using the car and whatever. It means so much to you that maybe, I guess, letting it move on, I guess if you're going to do something else that has equal, then, it means a lot.
It definitely does. You know, that car in particular, like for instance the Spa trip and meeting people like, you know, the guys from Writer Engineering, things like that, those memories are massively important to me as part of my life. There's almost a number for anything. There's silly numbers that you would be, you know, you would never say, I will never ever sell that, because somebody crazy with loads of money might come and just offer you silly amounts of money for it. You'd be stupid not to take it. But in general, like again, coming back to the 964, actually, as I say, I have had offers on that, which are substantial, really quite big amounts of money. But that I have that memory of driving through Japan with it, with my wife, and sort of breaking down in it, and all the drama that we went through, all the fun and awkward situations. Every memory that I have in that car just is directly associated with it. Every time I look at it, I can remember, you know, driving through the toll roads at silly speeds and all those fun times. So that would be very difficult for me to move on that one.
It's such a pain, isn't it? Like I've got a car like a few, like I just look at them and I'm like, I don't know. I wake up one morning, mate, it's got to go. Like I'd rather have something else. And then I think of like the memories, and I've got a photo in a cool location with the car and the memories, and I'm like, oh, but how do I sell that? Like, it's really hard. I've
got one at the moment. I have contemplated selling my 64 Impala. I've got an old school fake lowrider. It's a lowrider, but it's on air, but it looks like a lowrider. Very, very cool car. It was my wedding car. The wife didn't have one. She just drove the Macan. But yeah, I kind of built that car with the excuse of driving to my wedding in it. And again, I have huge memories of that. But I unfortunately haven't driven that this year, which is a real shame. Normally I'd sort of make a point of getting it out in summer.
Yeah.
But this year I've just not found the time for that level of potential drama that it brings. Like, it's quite a reliable thing, but it's certainly not an easy thing to drive. No power steering, extremely low, hydraulic, like manual air ride on it as well. So switches rather than actually like a computer controlling it. I think it's a big effort, but I'd still just enjoy looking at it. I just think it's such a shame for it to sit there. That's the problem. Yeah. And the one year I was very similar. I parked it at Cafe and Machine for a few months because I just thought
I saw it there.
Real shame. Yeah, just needed to sort of let people see it rather than getting covered in dust at the back of my workshop. So yeah, I'm contemplating selling that at the moment, but whether I could bring myself to do it or not, I just don't know.
Yeah, I find once it's gone, I'm fine with it. I've never gone like, oh, because there's a reason why it's going to go, and invariably I buy something else. But yeah, I just wish they were sort of, I don't know, I don't wish I was into this, but like I wish I was sort of into watches, something small that you just put in a drawer and they didn't fall
easier,
apart.
Wouldn't it?
So I normally wrap these up, and I realise we've actually chugged on for quite a while. We've done an hour and a half, which is good going, with 5 questions. Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
It has to be the Japan trip. I know we've already spoken about it, but yeah, we started off in Fukushima Prefect, collecting the car near sort of Ebisu circuit. We didn't actually end up going there, but a friend of mine out there had bought the car for me, chased it down after I'd seen it on an auction site some months beforehand and missed out on it. So yeah, arriving there and getting in this absolutely crazy and slightly unreliable at the time 964 turbo with my wife, and doing this bonkers trip that we'd kind of planned out for months of where we're going to stop, and it worked out. Pretty much everything worked out. But yeah, the memories of doing that, I'd do it again in a heartbeat with my little one as well once she's old enough. I think that would be my plan, is to maybe ship the car back to Japan and do the same thing but my own responsibility in terms of the reliability of the car and understanding of how it works. Because we had an issue with the fuel pump in it. That's all it was. It was actually wiring to a fuel pump. There was an intermittent fault, and it would leave us broken down, at the top of a mountain overlooking Fuji. It was incredible, the whole thing. But yeah, I think when she's old enough, I'd love to go back and do the Japan trip again.
That is such a cool thing to do. Like, buy a car somewhere else. I mean, logistically that is complicated, but then, go and collect it and get the memories. Because like memories in other places with cars, I mean, that's what it's just all about, isn't it? It's like taking 100%. Them to places.
I would, if it wasn't for cars, I'm not sure what I would have ended up doing, but I wouldn't have met, a fraction of the cool people that I've met. I wouldn't have a business that allows me to do what I do. Cars are, funnily enough, like I think most people can tell it when they watch me on YouTube or wherever, or even my Instagram feed. You can get that they are the hugest part of my life. They've it's led me everywhere, all over the world, doing silly events and drifting in different countries, and like adventures like that. Where would I be without them? I have no clue. I'd probably be very bored.
Or doing something else, but unknown. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life, sports car, what would it be?
Is that a two-seater? A sports car or?
Well, I used to phrase this question, and I'm sort of evolving it slightly. It's you have one car, unlimited value, you've got to drive for the rest of your life, but you have one really, really, really cheap something else, so that could possibly fulfill family duties or tow something or whatever.
It's going to be really, really difficult to say anything interesting here, because I've owned GT3s. Like what a GT3 does for me, whether it's a 997 to the 992 that I've got now, it's where I want to be.
Yeah.
Daily driving, going to a track, going to do the shopping, whatever it may be. It does absolutely everything except for that third seat at the moment. Yeah. So maybe a GT3 with the rear seat, because you can do that.
You can.
So get rid of you'd have to lose the buckets then, though. I'm not sure I could do that.
So a friend of mine did it to his 991.2.
With the old reclining seats.
Yeah, I think he has a folding. But you could have one folding seat.
Yeah.
And one fixed.
You could make it happen. I would definitely be able to make it happen one way or another. And I think that if you had to have one, what a terrible place to be. Yeah. 992 GT3 would probably be my choice, because I think, I love the classic stuff. I adore the Metzger engine. I adore the manual gearbox in the 997, but as an everything car with sort of the commuting aspect as well. And what PDK does in general on track as well is absolutely phenomenal. I'm such a big fan of it in every way. I'm not it must be a manual guy or it must be a PDK or DCT guy. I'll have a mix of all of them and enjoy all of them in the different circumstances. But that for me would probably be the one single boring answer, I'm afraid, because I know that lots of people probably go for sort of 911 GT variants for the answer to that question.
Yeah. I'd love someone to do an engine swap. Basically, I want a GT3 engine in not a GT3 for my normal usage. Like in a turbo with a GT3 engine in it that's 2-wheel drive.
It'd be phenomenal.
Be so cool.
There's been a few builds like that over the years, and there's some really crazy stuff that guys in America do with the Pikes Peak turbocharged GT3 engine. So high revving, but with the turbo as well. Still sound pretty decent. But the naturally aspirated side of that engine for me is everything.
It is
a lot
everything.
of stuff I do. I've got the V10 engine, the V12 engine that I will always choose naturally aspirated over forced induction. It just works for me acoustically.
Yeah, it does. It just, you get more fizz. You get more fizz
definitely.
from an engine like that.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment? What should be worth more?
That's such a difficult question because I'm an old git that is used to certain cars
Being cheaper.
being priced at a certain level. And I see what people are willing to pay now for things that are relatively normal. And I think it's brought on massively by the world of financing, cost of a car being X amount per month rather than actually
Which could change. Will change.
Yeah, absolutely. I really struggle with everything modern and modern prices, undervalued. I still think that E46 M3s, they're way up there, but I still think that's one of the best cars that ever came out of the M division when it was the real M division, not the current M division of M Sport or M level of trim or M whatever, actual M3. So that and the E90 M3 for me are the last of the real deals. And I think they're both sort of still relatively achievable money and potentially pretty good investment to just enjoy and not lose money on if you did come to sell it down the line. So maybe that, some kind of old M3.
I think that's a good option. What's the most interesting car to you at the moment? What are you looking up, Googling, researching? The video I've watched probably 3 times, which I never do on YouTube, is one of it's the Pagani Huayra, the noise that thing makes, and my obsession with sort of naturally aspirated V12. The header design, the manifold design on that is an absolute work of art, and just RPM, no silencers. The rest of it, as with much like the Murcielago, I really like the way Murcielago looks, but that was a car that was built around an engine, and I think that's kind of the case with the Pagani as well. It's not a car I'd ever contemplate owning, but it's certainly, I mean, just purely from a financial aspect, but it's certainly the most exciting thing I've heard and seen go through a track for years and years and years. I think for that to exist in the world that we live in at the moment is hats off to them. Absolutely incredible sounding thing. And it just makes me want to make my Murcielago sound just even more like that. Even though the Mercy sound is, for me, pretty peak, that I think is just the same sort of thing. No silencers, like the same sort of thing as the RGT cars, GT1 cars back in the day. It's no silencers, screaming down the straight. Who really cares whether it's going like as quick as anything else? The noise and drama that it brings to every track it ends up on, all day long. But I'd have one of those. That's it. It's like certain cars, it's just powertrain. It's like that powertrain. I don't care what it looks like. I mean, it's nice if it looks good, but that experience. Like when I heard the GT1 car going around Spa, and you could hear it like most of the way around the track, just and every time they're changing, there's big flames coming out the back, and you're like, oh my god, this is so sick.
It's everything, isn't it? I mean, that is it for me. Is I guess what excitement, drama a car brings, and high RPM, naturally aspirated, multi-cylinder, V8 above. is where it's at.
Yeah,
Really
for sure.
enjoy it.
5-car garage, unlimited value.
I really find it quite hard to answer things like this, because I'm really, really lucky to be in the position that I am to have a lot of the things that I would choose in that garage. So GT3, boring answer, 992 GT3 would be one of them. E30 M3 Track Car, my specific one, because, you know, as I said, it's kind of built to what I think is my perfect spec, nearly. Nothing's ever perfect, but nearly. Tow car / family car. I probably have, in a perfect world of no car theft, I'd have an RS6 again. I got rid of mine because it worried me too much.
Really?
But that was my tow car for quite a while. I've only got a single car garage at home, so I swapped that out for a Cayenne Turbo recently, which is great at what it does. But yeah, I'm not really a SUV
more
guy.
of a wagon person.
Yeah. I would probably have, just because I've never experienced it and never built one, I'd probably have an underground racing twin turbo Huracan.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Something, but really silly, not like any of those weak, 1,600 horsepower jobbies. It'd have to be like
2+.
the 3,000 horsepower one that, completely useless on the road, but just mind-bending speed. And I guess probably, it'd be impossible to make happen because you're not allowed to have them in your own garage, I believe, but a Huayra R would probably be there as well. I think they're looked after by Pagani. You can't actually have them.
Yeah, maybe.
One of those, like the FXX.
I don't think they're quite as bad as Ferrari, as in like you
Right.
pay me the money and you just don't get the car. And you can't sell it and you can't do anything like that.
Yeah. But that would probably work out as a pretty exciting sort of long-term 5-car garage to do most of the stuff I want to do with cars.
It'd be pretty good. Yeah, not bad. Right, well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
No worries, we made it eventually. It's
We did.
been 3 years since you started asking me.
Well, when I first asked you, I think you just had your kid. So
Just had Hannah, I think so. Life was a bit of a whirlwind then. So, no, I'm glad we could make it happen. And thanks very much for having me on. It's been enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been good. Thanks very much.